Old School Lane Casual Chats is brought to you by oldschoollane.blogspot.com and is associated with Channel Frederator, Manic Expression, The Comic Book Cast, and The Arun Mehta Show.
The sun is shining, it's a lovely day, a perfect morning for a kid to play, but you've got lots of bills to pay. What can you do? You work real hard and the pay's real low, and every hour goes oh so slow, and at the end of the day there's nowhere to go but home to Avenue Q. You live on Avenue Q, your friends do too. You are 22 and you live on Avenue Q. You live on Avenue Q. You live on Avenue Q.
Hello everyone, welcome to a brand new episode of Casual Chats. I am Patricia, and I am back with Arun Mehta from The Arun Mehta Show. Welcome back.
Hello Patricia, how are you doing?
I'm doing good. So today we're actually going to be doing, which is crazy to think because I can't believe that I haven't done this at this point, the very first episode of Casual Chats. We're going to be talking about a musical. We're going to be talking specifically about Avenue Q.
This is going to be a huge one because we're talking about something that's, it's like one of the biggest musicals that's ever taken place, really, and its uniqueness is definitely something to be worth talking about.
Yeah, so it first debuted in Broadway around March 2003. Actually, it debuted off-Broadway in March 2003, and then it opened to Broadway around July 2003. So, can you believe that it's been around for about 15 years?
Mm-hmm. And, it was, the launch of it was definitely, it was one of those things that really had to garner attention at a very, very fast pace, and though it did have a bit of help along the way. So, I'll talk about how I discovered Avenue Q. So, are you familiar with the anime series Nataro?
No, I'm not.
Okay, then. So, there was, it wasn't just Nataro that was happened with this. It was basically a meme appeared online, and it was based off one of the musical numbers out of Avenue Q, which is The Internet is for Porn. And so, as you can probably imagine, this meme took off not just on the different websites at the time. It's one of its biggest launches pads, at least for myself, was a website called youthemannowdog.com, which is YTMND for anyone who's probably familiar with that. So that launched on there, and then it just spun off at that point, and so there was a lot of parodies done of it and online, and so we kind of took off from there. And so I was looking at all these memes about this song of The Internet is for Porn, and I was thinking, good grief, where has this come from? And this is when I discovered probably years later, after it actually launched, that there was a musical called Avenue Q. And so that was my discovery of how I found it. So I was kind of late to the party in that situation.
Yeah, it's kind of funny for me of how it's kind of like similar to your story, Aaron, in which, the song was like spread around through the internet. I used to see a lot of videos of people in conventions. Whenever they would do like performances, they would be singing The Internet is for Porn, or, songs like that, dressed up in various costumes, whether it be anime or superhero. And then I was like, this is really interesting. It's like, where did this come from? And then I used to see a lot of AMVs in which they use similar songs. They use that song. They use I'm Not Wearing Underwear Today. A whole bunch of other songs. And then eventually, when I heard the news back in, I think it was like 2008, I believe. So that would have been like 10 years ago, that Avenue Q was going to be performed in the theater by West Palm Beach, which is where I lived around the time. And then I decided that I wanted to go check out this show. So I did, and I got the shirt, I got the hat, I have the poster, which a lot of people know if you guys seen my videos, that I do have an Avenue Q poster up there. and it's autographed by the cast that was performing Avenue Q at the time. So when I saw it, I was just enamored with it. I listened to more of the songs. I got the context of the story and why The Internet is for Porn was even sung. And so that was when I decided, you know what, I got to get the soundtrack. And I was just so enamored with it that, it became one of my favorite musicals of all time. And I just can't believe that it's been 15 years since it's been around. It's like one of the longest running Broadway shows in New York. I know that it doesn't, I know it pales in comparison to stuff like Phantom of the Opera, but still, it's pretty well known for a reason.
Yeah, well, there was one, I believe it was the critic of the New York Times who kind of compared it to The King and I and West Side Story, as it's like one of those kind of like mainstay musical productions, and you definitely also bring up Phantom of the Opera, and it's kind of like one of those ones that it's had such a reflection with people that it's now gone to pretty much global at this point, and there's even like spin-off productions currently going on as we speak. So it's just one of those phenomenons that has just taken off. But Patricia, I want to ask you a question. Do you think this phenomenon would have existed naturally on its own if it wasn't for the internet?
Ooh, that's a really good question. I don't think so, because, here's the thing, even still to this day, that musicals are a bit of a niche audience. I think around the 2000s, musicals started becoming a lot more popular in the mainstream again, with the likes of Chicago and Hairspray, and then it just kind of lost its luster with Mamma Mia and Nine, and now we're kind of seeing a resurgence of it again with La La Land and The Greatest Showman. But even now, being a fan of musicals is sort of the fan base of it is growing, but I think that because of the songs from Avenue Q, kind of being so irreverent and so hilarious if you just listen to it by itself, I think that it wouldn't have been as popular if it wasn't for the internet.
Yeah, I think the other thing about it is that musicals now, we've seen how Disney now wants to turn basically virtually everything into a musical, and even to the point where even Nickelodeon has even got onto the craze. So, with obviously the SpongeBob SquarePants musical has not done as well as everyone had hoped, and soon is going to be closing. But, you can't say that it's not got to the point where Nickelodeon aren't now even putting their hat into the game and saying that, hey, we're going to turn these all our properties that we have good ideas for, and we're going to put them out there onto Broadway form. And even Disney's starting to get onto that as well. So I think one thing that companies are aware that this musical craze is going again, and now they're starting to throw all their intellectual properties into it. And so whether that's a good thing or a bad thing, I think I'll just leave for the fans to decide. But in regards to originality, and in recent ones, it's been it is quite a small selection of plays, and Avenue Q is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and another thing that also makes it stand out is that the production is half humans and half puppets. And for anybody who's a huge Muppet fan, this will be a blast for them. And this is 15 years before Happy Time Murders, in which it's supposed to be a dark comedy featuring with both humans and puppets. So it's sort of an R-rated Sesame Street. It's sort of taking the contemporaries that we know about Sesame Street and kind of turn it on its head. The character...
Well, I think it was the way I describe Avenue Q is that I think it's the antidote to Sesame Street. And, Sesame Street, if you remember back in the day, it was a very empowering show, and it was a very educational show. And it kind of made kids feel like they were special, and made them feel like and empowered them in that way. Now, Avenue Q does pretty much in every satirical form to kind of strip away any of that was there led before, and so it actually leads to an interesting question that I wish I was able to address, at the very end of the podcast, but I'll save it till then. But in regards to the present representation and stuff. In a way, it is and it isn't kind of like an original thing because, I mean, you know, Sesame Street, you know, and the Muppets and everything, they've always done stage shows, you know, long back in the past. I mean, the Muppet Show ended up being a TV phenomenon back in the day, and that was a mixture between humans and puppets on a studio stage. And also, I remember way back in my childhood when Roald Dahl's The BFG became a musical, and that in itself was also a mixture of puppets and humans because you know, if you've read the BFG, you obviously know that Sophie and the BFG exist in this world of, like, you know, giants and humans. So when they entered into the giant country, obviously they did the human characters as the giants, and then they did like the other humans as the puppets. And then when it obviously turned around, they obviously made, you know, these giant puppets of the giants, and then the humans became normal size again. If you get what I'm saying. So, you know, what Avenue Q did wasn't necessarily unique from a technical perspective, but from a presentation and from a writing and from a I guess from a musical perspective, yeah, this was very unique for what Avenue Q definitely did.
Yeah, I mean, of course, you know, there have been a lot of, you know, humans and puppets in forms of movies and TV shows in the past, but something like Avenue Q was just like, you know, it just felt incredibly different in a time in which when even the Muppets weren't even doing that well. Like around the early 2000s, they were kind of like losing their luster. This was like years before Disney had bought the rights to them, and even then they were slowly building up towards relevancy until you know, the Muppets movie came out like around, I think, 2011, I believe.
Yeah, well, the thing with back then is that you know, the Muppets were always just, you know, the Muppets. They didn't really evolve all that well. They all kind of retained the status quo, and it's like, yeah, you know, before everyone keeps saying like, oh well, you know, Kermit and, you know, Miss Piggy divorced and remarried a couple of times or became estranged or whatever, but, you know, that was just kind of like part of the story, if you will. Like, you know, that in itself wasn't new, and you know, I would say that I would say Robot Chicken probably advanced the Muppet storyline. You know, if you remember the satirical, you know, Dr. Teeth and the I forgot the name of the band now, but it was when they did those satiricals of that, so like you know, the Muppet canon never really stretched away from its normality. It was always kind of like, you know, Kermit, Miss Piggy were always on and off, and, you know, the Muppets were just kind of the same, really. So, you know, you can't blame it for kind of like, you know, dying away when it wasn't keeping grip with the audience.
Yeah, I guess so. That's true. I mean, when they were releasing like those movies that not a lot of people really liked, like I think there was like Kermit's Swamp Years, and I think there was the Muppets with the Wizard of Oz or something. So yeah.
Yeah, but Avenue Q pushed the boundaries of that. Like it was taking this world that the Muppets had created, and it was just it wanted to kind of just be an antidote to that. So it wanted to say, oh, look, okay, here's the Muppets, the thing, you know, here's this wonderful world that they're all in, and this kind of, you know, this here's Sesame Street with, like, you know, how you can learn numbers and you can be special and you can be everything like that. And Avenue Q basically took all of that and said, look, you're not special, you're just like everybody else, and like this is the way life is, and this is what goes down in your life. And that's the I guess the kind of cold humor that Avenue Q, and I guess that's kind of what people gravitate to, the fact that yeah, it's supposed to be a laughing satirical thing, but at the same time, it's kind of real when you think about it, and you know, when you're looking at all the sketches that they do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's true. So I guess you know, without further ado, after talking about this for over 10 minutes, I guess we can finally start talking about Avenue Q. Now, if you are not wanting to listen to the podcast because you want to check out Avenue Q for yourself, it's still running on Broadway. They're going on tour, so if it is around your area, then definitely like purchase a ticket and go watch it for yourself. I do highly recommend that you do so.
Yeah. We're going to go into massive spoiler territory here, everybody, and also to note as well, me and Patricia are coming from this from two very different perspectives. Patricia has actually seen the actual production in West Palm Beach, like she said before. I've only seen the TV special here in the UK, so we're coming from it from two different angles here.
Yeah,
so,
and when did you? And I'm actually curious. When did you see the TV special?
very long time ago, I'll be honest with you. So I think it was when, maybe it was probably like maybe 5-6 years after it actually began. And so we're probably talking about 2008, 2009 territory.
Okay, so you have seen like the original run right before they started changing the story in 2010, which we'll get to in a minute. Don't you worry. Okay. So here we go. So basically, the story focuses on a freshly graduated college student named Princeton who has a BA in English, and he's just enthusiastic about life. He wants to be able to find out what his purpose is, and so he lives in this area in New York called Avenue Q, and he's surrounded by a whole bunch of people from, let's see, there's Kate Monster, who's a kindergarten teacher. There's Rod and Nikki, who are both roommates. There's Brian, who's a comedian, his fiancée Christmas Eve. And there's Trekkie Monster, who, he's the one who says the internet is for porn. And of course, there's
There's a lot to actually kind of digest. Right at the beginning, there's like a huge amount to digest here. So, I mean, in regards to the intro, and I noticed in like this in the old and the new, like they try and, I think at the beginning of the production kind of fool you that the puppets are just going to be trying to like be there as realistic as possible, and the people kind of like are in black and kind of exist in the background. But then they just pull down the entire curtain after that, and you see them kind of like running around with the puppets.
Right.
And so
exactly.
I don't know whether they tried to play that to humor or not, but you kind of like see like, oh, okay, then this is going to be kind of like just the puppets on their own, and it's like, nope, it's kind of like here they are, and you can see them all in. In full thing, like, because do you remember back in the day it was a long time before, you learned about how, Jim Henson's, when he first started doing the Muppets and everything, it was a long time before you actually heard about how the whole thing was basically produced. So, like, they were, the staging of, like, the Muppet production would be, like, above them, and, the humans would all, because the Muppeteers, if you will, were all, like, below. And like microphones strapped to their heads and everything like that. You didn't see any of that part of the production for a very long time. But then with Avenue Q, basically, it's like in the first couple of minutes, like they just strip it away and say, hey, look, this is where it is, down and dirty, and this is how it's all made.
Right,
so,
exactly. So, I guess we can talk about each and the characters individually. So let's start off with Princeton. So Princeton recently graduated from college. He has a BA in English. He talks about how he's going to try to make a difference, how he's going to try to find his purpose. And so he recently moves over to Avenue Q. And he's kind of like our window to introduce the rest of the characters. And slowly but surely, once everything is going on in his life, he kind of like... goes through many phases. First, he falls in love with Kate, then they break up, and then he starts dating a stripper puppet, then he starts becoming depressed, and then he starts becoming optimistic again, and he just goes through a lot of phases. And I guess that's like every person who is like in their early 20s who, they just finished school and now they want to find out, what am I going to do in this world? What's my purpose? And I guess for a lot...
Well, it has to be kind of the theme of his character, because at the beginning, like, he talks about wanting to have like purpose in life and things like that, and then they kind of they strip him down pretty much at that point, where they like he moves into Avenue Q. He's got all these bills, and he's supposed to be starting this job, and then all of a sudden he loses it, and then it's like, oh my goodness, like, what am I going to do? And so it's like it is a roll. He does go through pretty much a massive roller coaster, and it's all told in song. And so I'm actually pretty glad they did the whole thing in I guess the only way you can do it is in a Sesame Street style musical form, because if he just kind of like let it out like within just in dialogue, like, it would have been pretty depressing to watch.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah. So the next character we're introduced to is there's Kate, and then there is Brian. So they're talking about if they're whose life sucks the most. So basically, you immediately start off with Princeton, who's like optimistic, and then you just like jump total shifts with Kate and Brian talking about whose life sucks. It sucks to be me. And then they talk about the reasons on why their life sucks more than anybody else. So Kate's life sucks because she doesn't have a boyfriend. Brian's life sucked because he graduated from college 10 years ago and he wants to be a comedian, but he's failing at it. Rod and Nikki's lives suck because even though that they're both roommates, they're the complete opposites. Very, very Bert and Ernie-esque, or, you know, if you want to go to the original source, Oscar and Felix from The Odd Couple. And so there's just like this constant argument. And then eventually we have our next character who comes along, Gary Coleman.
And before we actually get into Gary Coleman, there is something I want to say about the comedian character that they bring into this. Rod, I believe it was, or is it the? Oh no, it's not Rod. Sorry, it's
Brian. Brian's the comedian.
Brian. Yeah. So Brian, if you notice in the intros of because I saw the 2017 edition and then I saw the earlier editions. Obviously, there's been massive changes, throughout its evolution. But I remember Brian having more of an elaborate intro when he first came in. Like he told a really a one-liner that nobody laughed at, and that was kind of like the joke. And then, but then in the new version, it's just kind of I'm a comedian, and I'm not I'm 33 years old and things like that. And he just kind of they initiated the fact that he was just he's 10 years and he's done nothing with his life more than the fact that he was a failing comedy writer. And so it was interesting that they made those changes over the years. So
yeah, that's very interesting because I haven't seen the newer version, so I don't know the changes that they did to the characters outside of Gary Coleman. But again, we'll talk about that later. So that's actually really interesting about the little tweaks that they did for Brian's character.
Yeah, just going on to Gary Coleman, actually, people might not know this, but there's actually been a debate going on that whether Gary Coleman gave his permission to basically use his name within the Avenue Q, story. And apparently, from what witnesses have told me, apparently that Gary Coleman did actually go and see the show, and he actually did give his approval for it. So
I see.
Yeah, so it looks like he lives on in Avenue Q, even though he's no longer with us anymore. So
that is true. So yeah, I'm actually glad that, Gary Coleman was okay with it instead of giving a stink. Very similar to Uri Geller, in which when he found out in his visit to Japan 20 something years ago that Pokemon was influenced by making the Pokemon they made Kadabra very similar to Uri Geller. In fact, that in Japan, Kadabra is called Yurengara. And he has the bending spoons, and he was so pissed off at it that he sued Nintendo saying, you better not use this character anymore because you turned me into an occult. And even still to this day, they don't do a lot of Pokemon cards or even show Kadabra as much in the anime. Now they're mostly focusing on Abra and Alakazam.
I can't believe that held up in court. It's he's not even a Pokemon, for crying out loud. He's not even an animal. It's he's not even named after him if you think about it. He's a Pokemon that bends spoons.
Exactly. It's
that could be anybody.
Yeah,
it could be freaking Neo from the Matrix for all we know.
Sure. Exactly. But still, I mean, at least Gary Coleman was okay with it. I mean, the whole fact about I used to be this celebrity, but now I'm a superintendent in this poor area in New York City. It's I'm glad that he kind of is okay with the fact that, I was once this famous celebrity, but now I'm switching between jobs because I can't pay my bills anymore. Remember a few years ago when
it would have been interesting if he actually decided to take up the role, and if he decided, oh, okay. I mean, obviously he got himself into a bit of controversy, in the latter stages of his life, but I'm not whether they would have wanted Gary Coleman at that point in time. I'm not too entirely sure. But,
yeah, that's very true. Traditionally in Avenue Q, a woman is usually playing Gary Coleman. Which, how in Broadway shows or in productions, they always have, their little traditions. In Peter Pan, if you are the father, you also play as Captain Hook. If you are in Hairspray, then it's a woman, a man who's playing as Edna Turnblad. So, I mean, with the exception of John Travolta, the men who have played the character on stage has been gay. So, I mean, it's different. They always have their little traditions. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see Gary Coleman play as Gary Coleman in Avenue Q. That would have been pretty fun.
Yeah, it's like he pretty much be entitled to it because pretty much it is him, isn't it? So,
Yeah, that's true, right? Exactly.
Yeah. So we're at the point where obviously we have the musical number "It Sucks to Be Me," and the TV special one I saw was obviously a bit more obviously they had to pretty much hype up the vocals on that and everything. So but they did cut it down for time, unfortunately. But obviously it was a good way to kind of introduce that, and obviously it's not really changed that much. I mean, obviously the Brian gets a little less of an intro in "It Sucks to Be Me," but Christmas Eve and everyone else pretty much gets to do their bits. Actually, Christmas Eve I believe was actually working because she's actually Japanese, but then they said that she was working in a Korean deli, I think,
exactly.
in the newest one, and apparently she was supposed to be working in she was like working in Chinese massage parlor, I think, in the original one.
Exactly, like a Chinese parlor, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why they made that change, but whatever. So that was another tweak that whether you think it was necessary.
No. I think in the original she was a therapist who had no clients.
Oh, okay. So, because I remember in one version she was definitely working in a massage parlor or something like that.
Yeah,
and obviously not the dodgy ones, but it was kind of like assuming that I'm doing something that's outside of my Japanese culture.
Sure.
Yeah, they assume it's kind of like it's an Asian stereotype.
That's fair. So. That's fair. Yeah. So, basically, after the introduction, we're introduced a little bit more with the other characters. Each of the characters have their own little arc. One of them is the relationship between Princeton and Kate Monster. The other one is, Nikki and Rod. And, Rod's kind of like acting a little bit odd. And Nikki's telling him, oh, well, Rod, I think you're gay. And then Rod is kind of like denying it.
Yeah, it's like I'm really glad that obviously they went on this. I should tell you what, they actually did somewhat spoil Rod in the when they first hyping it up for when they first came to the UK, because they were basically saying that he's Rod the gay Republican, and so you can definitely tell that that was the arc that he was going to go on, and that, and so but it was quite funny that they played him off as kind of like this right wing conservative.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and in the newest one, in the intro, you notice that he's actually defending Donald Trump's wall.
Oh, so, really?
He is in the newest one. He is, yeah. In the last one, I can't remember what right wing talking point he was mentioning in that one, but I do remember it being quite distinctive. If anyone wants to point out which one it was in the original one, and put it in the comments below. But I can't remember what the original one was, but I do remember it being something.
Yeah, I mean, it probably would have been like around like maybe Bush or maybe John Kerry. I don't remember.
Yeah, maybe. Well, if it was early 2000, or if it was 2003, the Iraq War was definitely going to be the talking point at that point. And on top of that, if you remember the Iraq War, the excuses that the Bush administration came up for invading Iraq. At first, it was like weapons of mass destruction, and then all of a sudden it was about the Russian destruction not being found, and then it was all about Saddam being a dictator, and then all of a sudden he was responsible for 9/11, which wasn't true. And so I think the talking point that Rod had for defending Republican policy, I think, changed over time between 2003 to 2010 when he finally, George Bush finally left. Oh, sorry, 2008. Sorry, I do apologize. That was you could definitely tell. If you keep a look at the productions of on YouTube, because people actually do film segments of the different productions, and you can definitely tell there's like different things for places in time. So that's basically how you tell what year you are when you're watching Avenue Q, because you can definitely tell if Rod's defending at that particular time.
Okay, that's fair. Yeah. So, and then we go over to another infamous song in Avenue Q, Everyone's a Little Bit Racist, which in this day and age, that is more apparent than ever. Like, oh my God.
Yeah. Little bit of Arun Mehta Show trivia. We played the intro of Everyone's a Little Bit Racist when the Hulk Hogan controversy was going down.
Yeah.
So, and so me and Harry, shout out to Harry, by the way, and so we pretty much came up with that intro, and even though it was not about Hulk Hogan being a little bit racist, but the song is actually, it is, unfortunately, it does speak to somewhat truth as well, that unfortunately there are people out there who are not just massively racist, but there are people who are a little bit racist and who make assume stereotypes and things. And that's happened to me as well. Like people just assume that just because I have an Asian complexion, that apparently I might be a Muslim, or I might be a Sikh or a Hindu or something like that. And it's like, well, no, I'm a Roman Catholic, so it's like that it does kind of speak to a somewhat truth in society that there are people who kind of make those assumptions about you.
Yeah, it's just insane. But I mean, just listening to that song and about how, Princeton thinks that Kate and Trekkie are related because they're both monsters, and discussing more about, like, the argument about, like, whether Jesus was black or white, and, all that kind of stuff. So, yeah, I mean, it really is apparent now. I think that back then, like many years ago when Avenue Q was just starting to become popular, that, the internet was for porn was the song. I think that nowadays everybody's been spreading around everyone's a little bit racist.
Yeah. Well, according to the Presbyterians, Jesus is Korean. So,
yeah, and exactly, and if you watch various skits from, like, Ellen DeGeneres, Jesus is a woman.
And also Ariana Grande also assumes God is a woman as well.
Mm-hmm. So, then afterwards, we get introduced to the Bad Idea Bears, which are these, like, two little bears who are a part of Princeton's subconscious. And, they're telling him to do, like, all these bad decisions, which I guess is, kind of like the Care Bears in a way, in which, like, oh, they're supposed to be happy and positive and spreading love. But no, this one is actually just spreading a whole bunch of stupid ideas that I'm sure a lot of people have done at some point. Hey, here's money for...
I tell you, the fact that they make them cute, and the fact that they make him do like that, it kind of reminds me of the the forest critters from South Park.
Yeah.
And those ones that say "Hail Satan," like they kind of remind me of that. So.
Exactly. So there's he gets money from his parents, and he's going to use it so he can buy rent, and he can be able to start doing his responsible things like paying bills. And then they're just telling him, no, spend it on beer, and then he's like, okay, let's do it. And they're just cheering for him. And then we get to the scene that everybody remembers, where Tricky Monster discusses about how the internet is for porn.
Yeah, and this is very much the famous song that, and it would, if this song hadn't existed, I'm not sure if Avenue Q would have gone as far as it has been. And so, because it's like it is the fact that it's insinuates at the end that normal people. It says that normal people don't sit at home and look at porn on the internet, and the whole music stops, and everyone in the crowd just starts laughing. Like it's like even the most dejaded male who doesn't really spend too much time in his laptop at least knows like 2 or 3 porn sites at this point.
Yeah,
I remember listening to a TED talk on research about internet pornography and the effect it has on male sexuality, and he was like saying to his when he was trying to come up with like his thesis, he was like saying, okay, well, I need to do some research, and I need to get some guys who have watched quite a lot of pornography, and compare it to a bunch of guys who haven't watched pornography. And the problem is that when he went to try and put it into practice, he realized that most of the people, pretty much 100% of the men around him had watched some type of pornography. So there was no way he could do it. So the internet is for porn is the reason it became the internet phenomenon, and also probably the Broadway phenomenon, I guess, of musicals, is because it's again everyone's a little bit racist. It speaks to some kind of truth that everyone has normal people do sit at home and look at porn on the internet.
Yeah, and if it's not like that sense in which it's live action, then it's definitely in the animated sense, because anime has its fair share of it, which is hentai, or if they even have like differences for people who are gay or lesbian. So there is some form of it out there, and if it's not, then you probably have read a magazine of it, or there's many ways, and there's a strong case in which maybe many people have seen it in some way, shape, or form.
Hey Patricia, which one do you prefer, X Hamster or Pornhub?
Oh no, no! Shame on you. Okay, moving on. So, God. Okay, so then we go over to then we go expanding more of Princeton and Kate's relationship. Princeton gives Kate a mixtape, and she's just reading off the songs that are in it, and that's when she starts reading off some of the lyrics, which may insinuate that maybe Princeton might like her. But then there's some songs in which, I think we're just friends, and then there's like some really confusing ones like.
I have to warn here. I watched the TV special, and I think they cut this one out for time. So I'm not too sure if I've actually seen this one or not. So I can't really comment on that one.
Okay, that's fine. So yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if they did cut this for time, because the only purpose of this particular song was just. Basically Princeton and Kate building up their relationship, and then it would have led up to them going over to the Clock Cafe where Brian does his stand-up, and that's where we get introduced to Lucy the Slut. So I wouldn't be surprised.
I was going to say, because in that case, then Mixtape is probably one of the weaker songs in Avenue Q. Not to say that the whole thing isn't strong. I'm not saying that at all. But the fact that you already kind of understand throughout the production that obviously Princeton and Kate Monster have this kind of thing for each other, or at least they're trying to force that to have this thing for each other, if you will. And so I think Mixtape was probably in the grand scheme of things a pretty unnecessary song, because in between all the other musicals you get to see kind of like their relationship kind of like start to grow.
Yeah, I mean, we already had that with Everyone's a Little Bit Racist, where, they started talking to each other, and then we already had, brief scenes of it, when Princeton was, telling Kate that he does kind of watch porn, so, that kind of does kind of build up to it. Although, some moments of Mixtape is pretty funny, like, when she reads off the songs, the whole love songs come first, and then the whole songs about friendship where she was like discouraged, and then she starts reading off the songs that are like really weird, like I Am the Walrus, Fat Bottom Girls, Yellow Submarine, What Does This Mean? And then they start talking about the rest of the songs, and basically it's just Princeton just gave her the mixtape, and they're just reading off the songs, and then they start thinking, maybe we should try giving our relationship a chance. But then it just pretty much just goes out the window when Princeton sees Lucy, and then they start, he starts kind of like, having like a slight crush on her, but then he starts getting really, really drunk, and then that's when they go have sex with each other, and then that's when
and is that going into I believe the song number, You Can Be As Loud As Hell. You can be as loud as hell as you want when you're making love.
Yeah, that's the one that's Gary Coleman's song, and it's pretty hilarious of Gary Coleman singing a song about sex.
Yeah, but before we even get into that, I mean, you can kind of understand from a vocal standpoint why Gary Coleman needs to be played by a woman, because she sings this like a lounge singer. So kind of like how Whoopi Goldberg will probably sing in Sister Act. So you can kind of see why they need a woman to play that. Not to say that there's probably a man with a very high voice that can play that, but at least the version that I saw, and again I have to see a clip of it because it wasn't involved in the TV special. But for obvious reasons, you can see. Think about it. We'll get that in a minute, but you can see why it's sang by pretty much in a lounge singer kind of style, and with backup vocals and things like that. So that I can see why Gary Coleman's casting choice obviously is played by females. But moving away from that, I mean even before the song starts and they have it there pretty much down and dirty, like the only thing it kind of comes across to is kind of like the sex scene in Team America World Police. I mean, like it's just it's there pretty much. I mean, you kind of just sat there kind of like you don't know whether to laugh or like or whether to kind of like be kind of repulsed by what's going on. It's kind of like one of those moments you're kind of sitting in the chair and you just kind of like feel really, really awkward just kind of watching all of this going down. And so, it's a pretty crazy scene.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
you think about it. And the fact that there's like a musical number, kind of like an elaborate music number going on around it as well. And at least in the clip that I saw, even like Gary Coleman kind of like dancing around it as it was going on. It was insane.
Yeah, it was pretty insane. Yeah. But yeah, I think I remember in the original musical that it was kind of like a silhouette in the window that it was happening. But I think from what I remember that it's actually like really out in the open that, that's when Gary Coleman decided to like sing that part of the song, which is insane. So yeah, there's that, and then
there's variations of it as well, because in some productions they have like all the tenants complaining about how noisy it is, and then in other productions that they've done in the past, they've basically just have the sex on the stage, and then just Gary Coleman just kind of singing about what's going on.
Yeah.
So there's variations of what happens in it as well.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. So yeah, then the next thing that happens is that, Kate is really happy that, she has a boyfriend now, and, Princeton decides to give her a lucky penny, and then she starts singing Fantasies Come True, and then the teacher calls her and says that she was late for work, and that, she decides to fire her, and then she just yells at her saying that she quits, and then you have Brian and Christmas Eve's wedding, and so that's then we go over to the sad news, and then this is when the end of the first act is, in which Princeton decides that they should just stay as friends, and that's when Kate starts singing "There's a Fine, Fine Line." And it's actually a really nice song. It's actually pretty sad when you consider that you went from, just being incredibly happy, and then it just kind of like falls apart around you, and then you just wonder, like, there's a fine line between a friend and someone that you love, and you have to be aware of it. And then there's also another song in which, when, there are the suspicions about, like, Rod and all the accusations pointing out to him being gay, and then he just says that, oh, no, I actually have a girlfriend who lives in Canada, and, he tries to convince them that, he has a girlfriend and he's not gay, and he kicks Nikki out of his apartment, and so Nikki kind of like lives on the street, and that's pretty much where the first.
They pretty much build up towards like it's kind of like a to be continued situation. So you definitely know when you've reached that part of the musical, like there's going to be an intermission coming through. So I don't know. It's like in a way, it's like it definitely does hit you when it finally comes, but at the same time, it's kind of like predictable. So, because it's kind of like, we've already gone through like, 45, 50 minutes of play here. You're due for an intermission. So, and then once that all goes down, then obviously it's time to go to the bathroom. And I tell you what, though, the way that they go out with the first act, though, I have to say it does create a lot of people like talking about what's going to happen in the second act. So it's a very good way to go out to create more intrigue in like because you got that 15, 20 minutes of wondering, oh, good grief, what's going to happen next? Like, it's a very good way to go out in the first act.
Oh yeah, exactly. Very. It leaves a lot of questions, like, oh no, Kate and Princeton broke up. Oh no, now Nikki's living in the streets and Rod kicked him out. What's going to happen next? So it does give you a lot of things to think about when the second act begins. So the second act begins with Princeton just being in his apartment for many, many weeks. He hasn't come out. He hasn't mingled with anybody. He hasn't paid his rent for months. And so Brian just basically comes up to him and says, hey, come out of there. There's a lot of things to do outside your apartment. And so they just go around New York City and they explore things. And then that's when Princeton meets up with Lucy, and then they start going out with each other. Mm-hmm. And Kate gets jealous.
It's quite interesting that they it almost kind of feel like they're kind of like restarting the first act a little bit there. It's like Princeton's basically being reintroduced to where he is, and so it's interesting that they went in that direction. But
exactly. So you have somebody who was enthusiastic about life, who wants to find out what his purpose is, and then you just have somebody who just doesn't care, and he just is willing to just do anything just so he can get an inkling of happiness.
Yeah, my only one critique of it is like it does feel kind of a bit like Family Guy a little bit. It's like Princeton, I can't believe you moved into Avenue Q. You not paid your rent for months, and now you basically have all you've done all your rent money on beer. Kind of like it's that's the only thing I don't particularly like about going back into the second act. But I can't really complain too much about it, I guess.
Sure. I cannot, and I'm actually really curious for anybody in the comments, but I'm actually was wondering how many people learned about the term Schadenfreude from watching Avenue Q.
I'd come across it once or twice, but and how how humiliating it is and things like that. But yeah, I know the fact that they now made a music number out of it. I guess so. Now I think a lot more people know about it.
Yeah,
so.
Exactly. So then
I guess it's a European term. I guess.
Yeah, it is German. Happiness of the misfortune of others.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess
But we did kind of skip one, which actually I had to go and hunt down again because I don't think it's in the original. I don't think it was in the TV special.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Christmas Eve, we sung the song. The
more you
I
love someone. Yeah.
Oh my god, it kind of reminds me of I'm sure won't we? Sure won't we? It's like, oh my god.
Yeah, I can understand why this was cut from the original TV line because very similar to Mixtape. This is another song that's not really necessary. I mean, Christmas Eve is basically talking to Kate about how if you're not if you weren't angry with Princeton, then that means that you still love him even though you're angry with him. So the more you love someone,
but she sings it in the obviously the Asian
the Asian stereotype
thing.
Yeah,
so it gets a bit uncomfortable at times, but
it does exactly. It does get a little bit uncomfortable, which is why when I heard the news about how in the Christmas Story Broadway musical that they actually cut off the scene of, deck the halls with fouls of Hori, that scene in which when, the family are in the Chinese restaurant and you have like the Chinese cooks and chefs like singing that song and it's the stereotypical Asian accent singing that deck the halls with foul that kind of stuff.
It's the one thing I'll definitely say about Avenue Q from 2003 to now is that you can definitely see the progressing creeping of political correctness kind of coming in because it's you can definitely see if you watch the original Avenue Q from 2003 there was a lot of offense that was definitely there, which I probably wouldn't be as accepted as probably now.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, I guess, that's another reason why they cut off this song, which, again, not very necessary. I mean, it kind of almost reminds me of that one Disney short in which you have the bears and, they're slapping each other. But the reason why they're slapping each other is not because they're angry, it's because that's how they showed their love. It's like the episode of Rugrats in which you have that girl named Megan who's constantly pushing Chucky around because she loves him. It's like... Oh man, I'm actually, how in Hey Arnold about how Helga shows off mean affections towards Arnold, but she loves him. It's like, she never actually physically beats him or, in that kind of sense to show that, hey Arnold, I love you, that kind of sense. It's like, not to reiterate the song from previously, but there is a fine line on how you do it.
Yeah.
Anyway, so... basically, you have so then the story continues with Kate throwing away the penny that Princeton gave her, and it actually hits Louis the Slut, making her go unconscious, and she's in a coma, and. And then that's when Kate and Princeton kind of try to make amends, but it doesn't exactly work very well. They start arguing again. And, that's when Rod and Nikki started coming back together with Nikki wandering around in the streets and, he sees Rod again. And then they start trying to make amends, but it doesn't exactly work very well. And so then they go over to the next song, which is I Wish I Could Go Back to College, where they feel that was their happiest time, right before they became adults and, going to school and learning about life and being enthusiastic about what's going to be the next step in your life is, which I can relate to because,
we could all relate to that. I think, I'll tell you what, the one thing, that's the great thing about this particular song is that, again, it's another relatable song because the majority of us have been to college and do remember life when we were, through the eyes of an 18 to 22-year-old, and we remember how enthusiastic we were back then, and now it's comes to the point where we're we're adults now, and that we've got responsibilities and things like that. And so it's when you had that freedom and everything like that, and you had so much possibility there. It was it's again another relatable song, which I give credit for Avenue Q for putting on, because again, it's a pretty ballsy sort of song to put up there as well, because for something that this is the thing with Avenue Q, for something that's going for satire, like, it definitely does make it as real as possible for people.
Yeah, and I think that's what I think that's what makes a lot of satirical movies really stand out. It's like, oh, it's not there just to make fun of things. It's also there to showcase things that are very realistic, which is why I think in some ways it makes it stand out, and it makes it still relevant in this day and age. I think, if you ever watch like Mel Brooks's movies, whether it be, Spaceballs, or whether it be Blazing Saddles or Young Frankenstein, there's a lot of nuances to relatability in a lot of things, while at the same time making fun of a lot of things, which is why I think that those movies are still, timeless in this particular day and age. The whole story about either racism or, the making fun of science fiction and merchandise, and, with, making fun of the horror cliches and stuff like that. There's realism in it. And I think that this song also is a realism to people who, they're adults now, and they wish to go back to a time in which things were simpler.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so then we go over to a scene in which you have Princeton, who gives a quarter to Nikki because he's still homeless, and then he starts feeling like really confident about like, now I know what my purpose is. I'm going to help Kate Monster give money to her monster school that she wants to build. And so he tries to gather up a whole bunch of money from everybody. And there's even this one scene in which, in the audience, the audience actually, like, they're actually participate in this, because the actual actors, they leave the stage and they're asking for donations for the school, which in reality, it's for the play, and it's supporting the official release and stuff like that, which I actually do remember giving like a couple of dollars for that, which I thought that was really cool, in which they actually had the audience participation of like, help, Kate build this monster school, and, stuff like that. That was actually really cool.
Yeah.
And
I remember some people saying that apparently it was like, in some instances, they said they were supporting local charities.
Yeah.
I don't know that for a fact, but there was, I think there's, in some of the productions, they did various out to like, do other things with it as well. So,
I think that when I was watching the show, I think that the charity we were donating for was like, for young students who want to go into the acting business. Like in our local area, we do have the theater that I was watching in, they do have classes for like students young and like kids and teenagers, and you have to pay a certain amount of money in order for you to take classes. I think that was what our charity we were donating for. So
yeah. I believe that area of Florida, there's the costume museum there as well.
Exactly, so, around where I used to live, there's a, we have a dedicated, theater, we have dedicated, theater classes, and there's a lot of like mainstream Broadway performances that happen in that particular theater. If you're wondering what theater I'm talking about, it's called the Kravis Center. It's in downtown West Palm Beach. And it's like one of the biggest, theaters around South Florida. That's where a lot of like really good top-notch shows happen. That's where they get their classes, and they have summer programs. So that was where the money was going towards. And then we have the ending in which Trekkie decides to give Princeton $10 million for the school, and then they're like wondering, where did you get that money? And it's like, the only stable investment is porn, which of course it is. And so then that's when Kate opens up her new school, and then that's when everybody starts, having their, their lives more stabilized. We have, Christmas Eve having a client, and we have, Brian having a consulting job, and Rod has a boyfriend now, and Lucy becomes a born-again Christian, and then Kate and Princeton decide to become friends. And then we have a new character moving into Avenue Q. So basically it just comes back full circle. And that's basically how.
And I believe also in one rendition of the show, apparently the bad idea bears discover Scientology.
Oh, I have no. Oh, that's right. Yeah, the bad ideas bears did discover Scientology. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah, I can't remember what rendition that was in. I don't know if that was in the earlier editions when obviously there was the Scientology controversy, or I don't know if it was in the later version.
I think it was the newer. Sure. I think it was the earlier version, because I do remember that, because Scientology was even still big back then.
Mm-hmm.
So right before we, conclude this, we do need to talk about the additional thing that they did added when Gary Coleman passed away. So around 2010, when Gary Coleman did pass away, they did added something new into the performance, in which they did kill Gary Coleman's character off in Avenue Q, and then he comes back as like some sort of guardian angel, I think, from what I remember. That but they do have they do have something else that they did for the show that I don't really know full detail of, because as I said before, I only watched the original run. I didn't watch the newer run, so I don't know what they did to Gary Coleman's character.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I remember when Gary Coleman passed away is that they did do minute silences, I think, for some of the productions that they did. But besides that, I don't remember a whole lot too much about what exactly they did during that time.
So if you have seen the newer version, please let us know in the comments, what did they do to Gary Coleman's character? I wouldn't be surprised if maybe they killed him off, or maybe.
Well, if I was aware, he's still kind of there, but I'm not too. Again, I've only been watching clips of the new one, so I'm not too sure exactly what happened to him.
Okay,
but,
that's fair.
He's still in there for.
Yeah, sure. Right. All right, so that's basically it for the play. So overall, from what from watching the original a long time ago, I still love it. It's still a great play. Has great characters. The story's great. The music is amazing, and it definitely is a nice little spoof of the whole Muppets ordeal. But at the same time, it's able to stand out on its own with its own unique story. And it's crazy to believe that Robert Lopez, who co-wrote the music, and who came up with the idea alongside with Jeff Marks, is now off doing bigger and better things with Disney, doing things like Winnie the Pooh and Frozen.
Mm-hmm. And so it's definitely going to be one of those. I mean, again, this thing doesn't has any plans of closing from the looks of it. I mean, it's even to the point where even high schools are even starting to do variations of it. So it's a phenomenon that's just taken off. I mean, its current rendition right now is in Chicago, and also it's currently got another production currently going in South Africa, I believe. So this thing's just going to start dominating the planet over the next. It's not already done that already, because you look at some of these productions that are currently going on. I'll name some of them off: Madrid, Argentina, Denmark, Paris, Netherlands, Edinburgh, Hong Kong, Shanghai, Vancouver, Denmark, Chicago, Poland, Melbourne, Australia, Australian tour, UK tour again, Portugal, South Africa, Chicago. If you could probably, by the time this is finished, you probably couldn't name a city or even a village that hasn't had its own variation of Avenue Q.
Right, exactly. So it's been around, and it'll continue to be around. Even with the 15th anniversary, they even did a special celebration on it. Which, I think they even brought some of the original cast members and the newer members together in a production, which is awesome.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've got a very interesting question that I'd like to end the podcast on. And Avenue Q pretty much is supposed to be the antidote to Sesame Street. And it pretty much plays off the characters of the Muppets and things, and obviously uses their technology, at least to a degree, and kind of uses their style and format, and obviously the songs are also kind of formatted to that. It's supposed to be kind of renditions of other Sesame Street songs as well. So I end with this question. Are you ready for it?
Yeah.
And again, when I ask this question, I'm not, wanting to speak ill of anybody or anything like that. I just basically just ask this out of pure curiosity. What do you think if Jim Henson was still alive today, what do you think he would have made of it?
Oh, wow. That's a really good question. I know that Jim Henson has always been the type of person to entertain not only the kids but also to the adults. He's always been very similar to like Walt Disney in a sense, in which he wants to entertain people of all ages. It doesn't really matter. And the fact that, let's be honest, Avenue Q, I believe, wouldn't exist if it wasn't for the fact of Jim Henson and his Muppets and Sesame Street. So I believe that in a weird kind of way, I think that he would be happy with it. I think that, the inspiration of the Muppets leading up to something like this, I mean, it's not like making fun of it for the sake of like being mean. It kind of like celebrates it. So I think he would be okay with it. I think he would be satisfied with it.
Yeah, and again, unfortunately, he's no longer with us. But it would have been intriguing to see what he would have made of it. And I don't think he would. I definitely don't think it wouldn't have been his favorite musical. But it's like I definitely would think that he probably would have had some kind of very strong opinion on it. I think whether it led on one way or another. So,
sure.
Yeah. It would. Yeah. So some of that as well. Maybe he would have looked at it and thought, "Oh, wow, my creation has gone to the point where it's now, inspiring other things." So maybe he might have taken that away from it. I'm not too sure. But it's it's just one of those thoughts I usually think about when I think about Avenue Q, and you see it on show, and it makes you think, what were the four founding fathers have thought of what's come of today in 2018?
Yeah, exactly. So, yeah, I think he would be okay with it. I mean, it definitely just shows you that, puppetry is just as strong as ever, in which I remember like many years ago, like even before the 2011 Muppet movie, I think I remember a time in which they were talking about like the Muppets were dead and puppetry is dead. I think I even read a few articles about that like once or twice. And with the comeback of the Muppets, they're going to be having a brand new Muppet Show in ABC's streaming service, and then they have the new Muppet Babies on Disney Junior, and, then we have Happy Time Murders, which is also part of the Jim Henson Corporation. And even still to this day, there's like variations of like puppet shows or characters who are puppets like on YouTube and stuff like that. I think that people in a way are never going to get tired of puppets. Yeah,
well, whatever we may have thought of it, is unfortunately it's probably Avenue Q in regards to at least adult puppetry. I think Avenue Q's been far more successful than the Dark Crystal.
I guess, yeah, I mean, even with Dark Crystal, I mean, they are going to get a prequel series on Netflix, so, I mean, it is, becoming irrelevant. I mean, it is becoming relevant again.
Relevant, yeah.
I can talk. It is becoming relevant again for the people who did enjoy watching it. I mean, even Cassim Gaines and he wrote a book about Dark Crystal last year where, he talked about it, so... I think that depending on what your favorite performances or shows or movies are on puppets, I think that in some ways, for a while we were able to thank Avenue Q for kind of like bringing a unique twist to it.
Mm-hmm. And it's if you see it out there, go and see it, because it's definitely unfortunately I've not had the chance to kind of go out and see it on stage myself, and the only chance I've only had basically been able to see it's kind of like on television, in a very refined form, and also just clips I've managed to find on the internet. So if you've been out there, if you had a chance to go out there and it's in your town that day, definitely go out and go and see it, because it's from what I see, it's a pretty phenomenal experience. From looks of it. And
it is a blast.
Massive amount of rewards and rating reviews.
Oh, trust me, it's a blast to watch. Like, it is so much fun to watch in person. Like, if you have a chance, then go. I implore you. If you're living in New York, then go watch it. If you know that it's going to be coming to your area, then please go watch it. Trust me, it's still worth it.
Mm-hmm. And also on top of that as well, it's also got a soundtrack as well.
Yeah, the soundtrack's amazing, by the way. I actually still own the soundtrack. I think I remember having the CD of it many, many years ago. Unfortunately, I lost it, but I think I still have the iTunes version, like, somewhere deep in my old computer. But no, seriously, the soundtrack is great. Listening to the songs standalone-ish, it's good. I mean, especially the internet is for porn thing. I mean, that's spread like crazy, and everyone's a little bit racist. But I can assure you, it is a lot better when you take it in context. When you know the situation on what the song is being sung in what particular scene, it's even better. So yeah, listen to the sound.
I always wanted to do like I wanted to say some like Hey Arnold clips and do like an internet version, do a version of The Internet Is for Porn, and have like Phoebe and Harold sing it or something like that.
Yeah, that would be hilarious. So yeah, final words. Seriously, go watch this. It's amazing. And by the way, if viewer discretion is advised. I do know that we have listeners that are of younger age, so you have to be at a certain age in order for you to appreciate this. If you're like of teenage age, then you can watch it, but in your own discretion. But if you are of age, like 18 or up, then definitely go watch this.
Yeah, but I would definitely say I think anyone who's clicking on this link and sees Avenue Q, I think they definitely know what. I like to think that a lot of people on the internet, when they first hear Avenue Q, they definitely know what they're in for.
Sure. Yeah. All right, I guess that's pretty much it. So, Aaron, thank you so much for coming on by.
Thank you for letting me on the Old School Lane podcast.
All right, so please plug and promote your stuff.
If you want to find me on the Arun Mehta Show, it's youtube.com/Arun Mehta Show, but please listen to me on Liberated Syndication because they appreciate me more there than they do on YouTube. So you can please listen to me on iTunes, Player FM, Stitcher, Podcast Directory, iHeartRadio, where Bending is still up. And also you can check me out on social media, which is facebook.com/Arun Mehta Show. Twitter is @Arun Show, arunmehta.tumblr.com, and also I'm on Instagram as well. So find me at Arun Mehta Show. So thank you.
Thank you. All right. Next time on Casual Chats, we are going to be talking about the Power Rangers franchise. Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is going to be celebrating its 25th anniversary. And I do have a lot of special guests who are huge Power Rangers fans who are going to be joining in. Special shout out to, I believe, Ben Thompson, who requested to have a Power Rangers podcast. You are going to be getting one, my good friend, so stay tuned for that. That's it, everybody, for this episode of Casual Chats. Let us know in the comments below about if you have seen Avenue Q. Who are your favorite characters? What are your favorite moments? What are your favorite songs? And if you have not listened to Avenue Q, then what made you get introduced to it in the first place? I'm really curious. And did you see the...
and tell us what's your favorite Internet Is for Porn parody.
Yes. What is your favorite parody of that? And also I'm curious, which version did you watch? Did you watch the original version or did you watch the newer version? So I'm actually curious because any of the questions that we did have about the newer version, maybe we can have answered. So that's it, everybody. Hope to see you around soon, and thank you for listening.
Finally, I get to teach a whole lesson all by myself. And I'm gonna teach something relevant, something modern. The internet. The internet is really, really great. I got a fast connection so I don't have to wait.
For porn.
There's always some new site.
For porn.
I browse all day and night.
For porn.
It's like I'm surfing at the speed of light.
For porn.
Trekkie.
The internet is for porn.
Trekkie.
The internet is for porn.
What are you doing?
Why you think the net was born? Porn.
Trekkie monster.
Oh,
You are ruining my song.
oh, me sorry, me no mean to.
Well, if you wouldn't mind just being quiet for a minute so I can finish.
Okie dokie.
Good. I'm glad we have this new technology.
For porn. Oops.
Which gives us untold opportunity.
For porn. Oops, sorry.
Right from your own desktop.
For...
You can research, browse, and shop. Until you've had enough and you're ready to stop.
For porn.
Trekkie.
The internet is for porn.
No.
The internet is for porn. Me up all night honking me horn to porn.